Welcome to Adoptions from Reddit, where real adoption stories come to life. Here you'll hear true stories from people who experienced adoption from different perspectives. Adoptive parents discovering unexpected truths, adoptees finding their biological families, birth parents sharing their journeys, foster care experiences, reunion stories, identity struggles, and all the emotional complexity that comes with adoption. Stories of loss and love, of finding where you belong, of difficult decisions, of heartbreak, of healing, and the raw reality of adoption. This is a real story, shared anonymously on Reddit. Some details have been changed to protect the identity of the people involved. My name is Catherine. I'm 28 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I promise you every word is true. Just 3 hours before I was supposed to walk down the aisle to marry the love of my life, my entire world shattered. Everything I thought I knew about my identity turned out to be a lie. The parents who raised me, the people I called mom and dad for my entire life, were not my adoptive parents like they told me. They were my kidnappers. They stole me from a hospital in Minneapolis, Minnesota when I was only 6 days old. And somewhere out there, I had a real biological family, a mother and father, 2 siblings, people who had been searching for me desperately for 28 years, people who never stopped looking, people who never gave up hope that I was alive. Now I'm dealing with the complete destruction of everything I thought was real. Let me tell you how this all started. It began with a simple DNA test, a fun activity at my bridal shower, something that was supposed to be lighthearted and entertaining. Instead, it unraveled a 28-year-old kidnapping case. It reunited me with a family I never knew existed, and it destroyed the only family I had ever known. My name, the one I used my entire life, is Catherine Marie Harrison. At least, that's what my birth certificate says. That's what all my documents say. That's the name I was going to change to Catherine Marie Chen after my wedding, but that's not my real name. My actual legal name, the name my biological parents gave me when I was born, is Charlotte Elizabeth Bergstrom. I was born on March 15, 1997, at a hospital in Minneapolis, Minnesota. 6 days later, I was stolen from the hospital nursery by a woman who worked there as a nursing assistant. That woman would become the person I called mom for the next 28 years. Let me take you back to the beginning, to my childhood, to the life I thought I had. I grew up in a small suburb outside of Portland called Beaverton. I had what seemed like a normal, happy childhood. My parents were Richard and Susan Harrison. I was an only child. From a very young age, my parents told me I was adopted. I actually appreciated this. They were always very open about it. They never hid it from me. They told me they had struggled with infertility for years. They said they finally decided to pursue adoption. They explained that they had adopted me as a newborn through a closed adoption in Minnesota. According to them, my birth mother was a young woman who wasn't ready to be a parent. She had made the brave decision to give me up for adoption so I could have a better life. I accepted this story completely. I never questioned it. I never doubted a single word. Why would I? These were my parents. They loved me. They raised me. They were there for every scraped knee, every school play, every birthday, every Christmas morning. I had absolutely no reason to believe anything they told me was a lie. My mom, Susan, was a stay-at-home mother my entire childhood. She was devoted to me, very attentive, maybe even a little overprotective. My dad, Richard, worked as an accountant for a mid-sized firm in downtown Portland. We lived a comfortable, middle-class life. Every summer, we took vacations, usually road trips. My mom didn't like to fly, so we would drive. Down to California, over to the coast, up to Seattle. We were close, a tight-knit little family unit, just the 3 of us. There was one thing that stands out to me now. Looking back, I was homeschooled until I was 14. My mom said it was because she wanted to give me a more personalized education. She worried about the quality of public schools. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now I realize the truth. Homeschooling me was probably a way to keep me isolated, to keep me away from situations where I might need to show identification, birth certificates, medical records, documents that might not hold up under scrutiny. When I was 14, I begged my parents to let me go to regular high school. I was lonely. I wanted to make friends. I wanted a normal teenage experience. After a lot of discussion and what seemed like reluctance from my mom, they finally agreed. I started attending the local public high school as a freshman. It was the best decision of my life. I finally got to be around other kids my age. I made real friends. I joined the drama club and the yearbook committee. For the first time, I felt like I was living a normal life. There was another thing people noticed, something that should have been a clue. I never looked like my parents. Not at all. People would comment on it sometimes. My mom would always joke and say, "Well, that's because she's adopted." She would laugh it off. I would laugh too. It made perfect sense. I was adopted, so of course I didn't look like them. Susan was short and a little heavy, with dark brown hair and brown eyes. Richard was average height and balding, with hazel eyes. And me? I was tall, 5'9" by the time I was 16, thin with long blonde hair and bright blue eyes. I looked nothing like either of them, but again, I was adopted. So that made perfect sense. I had a good relationship with my parents growing up. We were close. They were supportive. They came to all my school events. They helped me with college applications. They were so proud when I got accepted to Portland State University with a partial scholarship. They helped me move into the dorms when I was 18. My mom cried when she hugged me goodbye. I thought it was just normal parent emotion, their only child leaving home. In college, I studied communications and marketing. I made even more friends. I dated a few guys here and there, nothing serious. I was enjoying my independence and my life. I would go home for holidays and some weekends. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed fine. Everything seemed like a regular family. When I was 24, I met James Chen at a networking event for young professionals in Portland. He was working in software development for a tech startup. We started talking and we really hit it off. He was kind, funny, ambitious, handsome. We started dating. Within 6 months, we both knew we wanted to spend our lives together. He proposed to me on a hiking trip to Multnomah Falls. I said yes immediately. We set a wedding date for June, about 18 months away at the time. My parents seemed happy about the engagement. They liked James. They thought he was a good man with a good career. They were excited about the wedding. We started planning. My mom was very involved in helping, maybe even a little too involved, but I figured that was normal. A mother of an only child. A mother about to see her only daughter get married. About 4 months before the wedding, my best friend since high school, a woman named Taylor, had an idea. She suggested we do something fun for my bridal shower, something memorable. She thought everyone at the bridal shower should take an ancestry DNA test together. Then we could compare our results at a follow-up party a few weeks later when the results came back. She thought it would be fun, interesting, a good bonding activity. I thought it was a great idea. I had always been curious about my ethnic background and my ancestry. All I knew about my birth family was what my adoptive parents had told me, which was very little. Just that my birth mother was young and Caucasian, that my birth father was not in the picture. I had always wondered about where I came from, what my heritage was, if I had any genetic health issues I should be aware of. This seemed like the perfect opportunity to learn more. So at my bridal shower in February, about 4 months before the wedding, Taylor had ordered DNA test kits for all 15 of us. We all did the cheek swabs together. We sealed up our samples and mailed them off. We laughed and joked about what we might discover. I remember my mom was at the bridal shower. She seemed a little uncomfortable when Taylor brought out the DNA kits. She made a comment about how those tests aren't always accurate, how they're just for fun and shouldn't be taken too seriously. I remember thinking it was a strange comment, but I brushed it off. The results were supposed to take 6 to 8 weeks. I honestly kind of forgot about it. I was so busy with wedding planning and work and life. Then, about 8 weeks later, in early April, I got an email notification. My results were ready. I was at work when I got the email. I was excited. I logged into the website on my lunch break to check my results. The ancestry composition was interesting. 52% Scandinavian, 28% German, 15% British and Irish, 5% broadly Northwestern European. It was cool to see. I was looking at the different regions and countries, thinking about how I had all this Scandinavian heritage I never knew about. Then I scrolled down to the next section, the DNA relatives section. This section shows you other people who have taken the same DNA test who shared DNA with you. It estimates the relationship based on the amount of shared DNA. When I scrolled to this section, my heart stopped. Right there at the top of the list was a match. It said we shared 25% of our DNA. The possible relationships listed were half-sibling, grandparent, grandchild, aunt, uncle, niece, or nephew. The person's name was listed as Jonathan B. He was 30 years old. He lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota. There was a profile picture. I clicked on it. I saw a man who looked shockingly like me. Same blonde hair, same bright blue eyes, same facial structure. I felt my hands start to shake. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I sat there in my office, staring at this profile for probably 10 minutes, just trying to process what I was seeing, trying to understand what this meant. I kept thinking, okay, this is probably a half-sibling. Probably my birth mother had another child after me. Or maybe she had a child before me. Maybe this is my half-brother. I felt this surge of excitement mixed with anxiety. I had a sibling, a biological sibling. I had always wondered if I had biological siblings out there somewhere. Now here was proof that I did. I clicked the message button. I sent him a message. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. I wrote, "Hi Jonathan, I just got my DNA results today, and it shows that we're closely related, possibly half-siblings. I was adopted as a baby in a closed adoption in Minnesota in 1997. I'm wondering if you might know anything about this, or if we might be related through your family. I'd love to connect if you're open to it. This is all very new and surprising to me. Thank you, Catherine." I sent the message. Then I just sat there, staring at my computer screen, refreshing my email over and over, hoping he would respond quickly. I couldn't focus on work at all for the rest of the day. I just kept thinking about this potential half-brother, about what this meant, about whether I might be able to learn more about my birth family. I didn't tell James about it that night. I wanted to wait and see if Jonathan responded. I didn't want to get anyone's hopes up or make a big deal out of it until I knew more. I definitely didn't tell my parents. I knew my mom had always been a little sensitive about my adoption, about the idea of me searching for my birth family. I didn't want to upset her unnecessarily. The next day, I was at work again, compulsively checking my email and the DNA website. Then, around 2 in the afternoon, I got a notification. Jonathan had responded to my message. I felt my heart start racing. I opened the message with shaking hands. His message said, "Catherine, I'm in complete shock right now. You need to call me immediately. This is incredibly important. Here's my cell phone number. Please call me as soon as you get this message. This is not what you think. Jonathan." I felt my stomach drop. A wave of anxiety washed over me. The tone of his message was urgent, almost scared. I didn't understand what he meant by, "This is not what you think." I immediately grabbed my phone. I went outside to the parking lot of my office building. I dialed the number he had given me with shaking hands. He answered on the first ring. "Hello, Catherine," he said. "Yes, hi, this is Catherine. I got your message," I said. Oh my God, I can't believe this. Where are you right now? Are you sitting down?" "I'm standing in a parking lot." "What's going on? You're scaring me." "You need to sit down. Please sit down. This is going to be a lot." I went and sat in my car. "Okay, I'm sitting. Please tell me what's going on." He took a deep breath. "Catherine, I don't think you're my half-sister. I think you're my full sister. I think you're Charlotte." I felt confused. "What do you mean? Who's Charlotte?" "My name is Catherine. Charlotte is my sister who was kidnapped from the hospital when she was 6 days old in March of 1997 in Minneapolis. My parents have been searching for her for 28 years. I felt like the world stopped spinning. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. No, that's not possible. I was adopted. I wasn't kidnapped. My parents adopted me legally." "Catherine, when were you born? What's your birthday?" "March 15th, 1997. Charlotte was born on March 15th, 1997, at a hospital in Minneapolis. She was taken from the hospital nursery on March 21st. I felt my entire body go cold. No, this has to be a coincidence. This has to be a mistake. "How much DNA do we share according to the test?" 25%. "No, check again. Look at the actual amount, not just the percentage." I pulled up the website on my phone with shaking hands. I looked at the detailed results. It said we shared a very large amount of DNA. "That's full siblings, Catherine. That's not half siblings. We share the amount that full siblings share. You're my sister." I started crying. I couldn't help it. I just started sobbing in my car, in this parking lot. "I don't understand. I don't understand how this is possible. I need you to tell me about your parents, about the people who raised you. What are their names? Where do they live?" "Their names are Richard and Susan Harrison. They live in Beaverton, Oregon." I heard him talking to someone in the background. "I'm here with my mom right now, with our mom, Charlotte, with your mom. She's been waiting 28 years for this. Can I put you on speakerphone?" "Yes." Then I heard a woman's voice, shaking, crying. "Charlotte? Baby? Is this really you?" I don't know. I don't know if I'm Charlotte. My name is Catherine." "What do you look like, sweetheart?" "I have blonde hair and blue eyes, and I'm tall." "Oh my God, that's my Charlotte. You look just like me. I'm blonde and blue-eyed and tall. So is your dad. So is Jonathan. So is your sister Emma. We all look like that." "I have a sister?" "Yes, baby. You have a brother and a sister. Jonathan is 30. Emma is 26. They were born after you were taken from us." I sat there in my car, crying, listening to this woman, this stranger who was claiming to be my mother. She told me about her life, about their life, about how I was her firstborn child, about how she and my father, my biological father, whose name is Michael Bergstrom, were so excited to have me, about how I was born healthy and beautiful, about how she had a normal delivery and I was perfect, about how they were first-time parents. So happy, so in love with me. She told me about how, on the 6th day, March 21st, A nurse came and took me from the hospital room to do some routine tests. How she waited and waited for them to bring me back. How after 2 hours she started to worry. She called the nurses' station. They told her they hadn't taken me for any tests. They searched the entire hospital. They couldn't find me. They discovered that a nursing assistant who had been working that day had also disappeared. They found her ID badge in the trash. Her car was gone from the parking lot. The police were called. An Amber Alert was issued. But I was never found. She told me about how they never gave up looking for me. About how my father quit his job and spent 5 years doing nothing but searching for me. About how they hired private investigators. Followed up on every possible lead. About how they had my age-progressed photos done every few years, showing what I might look like as I grew up. About how they kept my room ready for me all these years. About how they celebrated my birthday every year, even though I wasn't there. About how they never stopped hoping, never stopped praying that I would come home. I was sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. I need to see proof. I need to see evidence. I can't just believe this based on a DNA test and a story. Jonathan got back on the phone. I'm going to send you photos right now. I'm going to send you the news articles from when you were taken, the police reports that are public record, everything. He paused. But Catherine, you need to understand something very important. The people who raised you, Richard and Susan Harrison, they need to be arrested. They kidnapped you. You need to go to the police right now. No, that can't be right. My mom, Susan, she loves me. She raised me. She wouldn't do that. Catherine, the woman who kidnapped Charlotte from the hospital, was named Susan Hartley. She was a nursing assistant at the hospital in Minneapolis. She disappeared the same day Charlotte was taken. I felt like I was going to throw up. He sent me the photos while we were still on the phone. I looked at them with shaking hands. There were news articles from March 1997. Headlines like "Newborn Stolen from Hospital" and "6-Day-Old Baby Missing After Hospital Abduction." There were photos of my biological parents, Michael and Linda Bergstrom, young and devastated, holding press conferences, begging for anyone with information to come forward. There were photos of me as a newborn in the hospital, wearing a little pink hat, wrapped in a white blanket. I looked at that baby. I realized that was me. That was Charlotte. That was the baby who was stolen. There were age-progressed photos, showing what I might look like at age 5, at age 10, at age 18, at age 25. They looked like me. They looked so much like me, it was uncanny. I realized that somewhere in a database, somewhere in police records, there were photos that looked like me, photos that anyone might have seen and recognized if they had known to look. There were also photos that Jonathan sent of himself, and Emma, and their parents, current photos. I looked at them. I saw my face reflected back at me, my eyes, my nose, my smile, in all of them. I knew with absolute certainty. These were my people. This was my real family. Everything I had believed about my life was a lie. I need to go. I need to think. I can't process this right now. Linda, my biological mother, spoke again. Please don't run. Please don't disappear again. We just found you. Please promise me you'll call us back. I promise. I just need some time. I hung up the phone. I sat in my car. I completely broke down. I sat there for over an hour, just crying, looking at these photos, reading these articles, trying to understand how my entire life had been based on a lie, how the woman I called mom had stolen me from a hospital, how I had been a missing child for 28 years, how I had a family out there who had been searching for me, mourning me, missing me, while I grew up completely unaware that any of this existed. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to call. I felt paralyzed. Then I finally called James. When he answered, I just started sobbing. Catherine, what's wrong? Where are you? Are you okay? No, I'm not okay. Nothing is okay. I need you to come get me. I'm in the parking lot at work and I can't drive. I'm on my way. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Just stay where you are. When James got there, I was still sitting in my car, crying. He got in the passenger seat. He put his arms around me. Tell me what happened. I tried to explain it to him. I tried to tell him about the DNA test, about Jonathan, about the Bergstroms, about how I might have been kidnapped as a baby. He looked at me like I was crazy. That's not possible. Your parents adopted you. You have adoption papers. You have a birth certificate. I showed him everything on my phone, the DNA results, the news articles, the photos. I watched his face change as he realized I was serious, as he realized this was real. Oh my God, Catherine, what are you going to do? I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should go to the police. I don't know if I should confront my parents. I don't know anything anymore. James took a deep breath. We need to go to the police. If this is true, if you were really kidnapped, then your parents, Richard and Susan, they committed a serious crime. There's a family out there who has been suffering for 28 years, thinking their child was dead, or worse. You need to help them get justice. But they're my parents, James. They raised me. They love me. How can I send them to prison? Catherine, if they did this, if they really stole you from a hospital, then they need to face the consequences, and you need to know the truth. We sat there in the car for another 30 minutes, talking about it. Finally, I agreed. We needed to go to the police. I needed to report this. I needed to get answers. James drove me to the Portland Police Bureau downtown. We walked in together. I told the officer at the front desk that I needed to speak to someone about a possible kidnapping case from 28 years ago. They looked at me confused. Then they took us to a small room. They said a detective would be with us shortly. The detective who came in was a woman in her 40s. Her name was Detective Sarah Morrison. She sat down across from us. She asked me to explain what was going on. I told her everything. The DNA test, Jonathan, the Bergstroms, the news articles, Susan Hartley, the nursing assistant who disappeared. I showed her everything on my phone. I watched her face become more and more serious as I talked. She asked me for my birth certificate and my driver's license. I showed them to her. She wrote down all the information. I need you to wait here. I need to make some phone calls. This is a very serious situation. We need to verify all of this information before we take any action. She left the room. James and I sat there, holding hands. I felt like I was in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. Detective Morrison came back about 45 minutes later. She had another detective with her, a man named Detective James Park. They sat down across from us. Catherine, we've been in contact with the Minneapolis Police Department and with the FBI. This case, the Charlotte Bergstrom kidnapping case, is still an open case. It's still being actively investigated. She paused. Based on the information you've provided and the DNA match with Jonathan Bergstrom, there is significant reason to believe that you are Charlotte Bergstrom, that you were abducted from the hospital on March 21st, 1997. I felt like I couldn't breathe, hearing it said out loud by police detectives, having it confirmed as real, not just some crazy mistake or coincidence. What happens now? Detective Park spoke. We need to arrest Richard and Susan Harrison. We need to take them into custody immediately. We need you to provide a DNA sample so we can do official testing to confirm your identity with the Bergstroms. And we need you to make a formal statement about everything you know about your adoption and your life with the Harrisons. I started crying again. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe my whole life has been a lie. Detective Morrison came around the table. She put her hand on my shoulder. I know this is incredibly difficult. I know this is overwhelming, but you did the right thing by coming here. We're going to help you through this. You're going to be reunited with your real family. That's a beautiful thing, even though it's also painful. They asked me if Richard and Susan were at home right now. I said I didn't know. They might be. They asked for the address. I gave it to them. Detective Park spoke again. We're going to send officers there right now to take them into custody. I need you to know that they will likely be charged with kidnapping and fraud and possibly other charges. They will be facing very serious prison time if convicted. I just nodded. I couldn't speak. I was crying too hard. They asked me if there was somewhere I could stay tonight, somewhere safe. I shouldn't go back to my apartment if Richard and Susan had keys or knew where I lived. I said I could stay with James. They said that was good. They asked James for his address and his contact information in case they needed to reach me. Then they asked me to provide a DNA sample. A technician came in with a DNA collection kit. She swabbed the inside of my cheek. They said the results would take a few days, but they would rush it given the circumstances. I spent the next 4 hours at the police station, giving my statement. I told them everything I could remember about my childhood, about what my parents had told me about my adoption, about how we had always lived in Oregon, about how I was homeschooled until I was 14, about how my mom was always very protective, didn't like to travel far from home, about how we never visited Minnesota, even though that's supposedly where I was adopted from, about how my parents always paid for everything in cash when possible, seemed nervous about official documents or government paperwork. I told them about how my mom had seemed uncomfortable when I did the DNA test at my bridal shower, about how she had made comments about the tests not being accurate. The detectives wrote down everything. They asked me clarifying questions. They were very kind, very patient, but I could tell they were also very serious about this case, about catching the people who had stolen a baby from a hospital 28 years ago. When we finally left the police station, it was after 9 at night. I was exhausted, emotionally destroyed. James drove me to his apartment. I just collapsed on his couch and cried. He held me. He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. My entire world had just been turned upside down. I didn't know who I was anymore. The people I thought were my parents were actually my kidnappers. I had a real family out there who I had never met. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of missed calls and text messages from my mom, from Susan. The messages started out normal. "Good morning, sweetie. Hope you have a great day." Then they became more frantic. "Catherine, please call me. The police are here. I don't understand what's happening." Then, "Catherine, please. You have to believe me. I love you. You're my daughter. Please don't do this." And finally, "They're arresting me, Catherine. Please help me. You know I would never hurt you. I love you so much. Please." I couldn't read them without crying. I couldn't process the fact that the woman who had raised me, the woman who had been my mother for 28 years, was now in police custody, was being charged with kidnapping me. I felt this horrible guilt mixed with anger and confusion and grief. I loved her. I still loved her, even knowing what she had done. But I also felt betrayed, violated, like my entire life had been stolen from me. James called his work, told them he needed a few days off for a family emergency. He called my work and told them the same thing. Then we just sat in his apartment all day, while I tried to process everything, while I waited for updates from the police. Detective Morrison called me around noon. Both Richard and Susan Harrison had been taken into custody. They were being held without bail. They were both being charged with kidnapping and fraud and several other charges. Susan had given a statement. She admitted to taking me from the hospital, but she claimed she did it because she was desperate to be a mother, because she had mental health issues at the time. Richard claimed he didn't know I was kidnapped until several years after they had moved to Oregon, but he had chosen to keep the secret because he loved me. He didn't want to lose me. I felt sick hearing this. These two people who I had trusted completely, who I had called mom and dad for my entire life, they had been living with this massive secret, lying to me every single day. They had stolen me from my real parents, kept me from them for 28 years. I felt angry, so angry, angrier than I had ever felt in my life. Detective Morrison also told me that the Bergstroms, my biological family, were flying to Portland the next day. They wanted to meet me as soon as possible. She asked if I would be comfortable with that. I said yes. I needed to meet them. I needed to see them in person. I needed to start understanding who I really was, where I really came from. That night, I called Jonathan. We talked for 2 hours. He told me all about our family, about our parents, Linda and Michael, about our sister, Emma, about what they were like, about what their lives had been like for the past 28 years. He told me about how they had never stopped searching for me, about how they had worked with private investigators, followed up on thousands of leads over the years, about how every birthday was painful for them. They didn't know if I was alive or dead, about how they had started a foundation to help other families with missing children, about how finding me was a miracle they had almost stopped believing could happen. He also told me about my biological grandparents. They had passed away, his grandmother when I was 10, his grandfather when I was 15. They had died still hoping to find me, still wondering what had happened to their granddaughter. I cried thinking about these people I had never met, these people who had loved me and missed me, who I would now never have the chance to know. The next day, James and I met the Bergstroms at the Portland Police Bureau. Detective Morrison thought it would be better to have the reunion in a controlled environment, with support available. I was so nervous I thought I was going to throw up. When we walked into the meeting room and I saw them sitting there, Linda, Michael, Emma, I started crying immediately. They looked like me. They looked so much like me. I knew without any doubt that these were my people. This was my real family. Linda stood up. She just stared at me for a moment. Then she started crying. "Oh my God, Charlotte, my baby. You're here. You're really here." She came over to me. She pulled me into a hug. I hugged her back. I cried into her shoulder. She kept saying, "I've missed you so much. I've missed you every single day. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry we couldn't protect you. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong." Michael came over. He hugged both of us. He was crying too. "I can't believe we found you. I can't believe you're here. We never gave up hope." Emma, my sister, was standing back a little bit, looking overwhelmed. I looked at her. "You're my sister." She started crying. She came over and hugged me too. "I've always known about you. I've always known I had an older sister out there somewhere. And now you're here. It's real." We all sat down together. We talked for hours. They told me everything about the day I was born, about what I was like as a baby in those first 6 days before I was taken, about how I had a little birthmark on my right shoulder blade in the shape of a heart. I lifted up my shirt. I showed them. I still had it. Linda touched it. She started crying again. "That's my Charlotte. That's my baby." They showed me photos from when I was in the hospital. Photos of me being held by Linda right after I was born. Photos of Michael cutting my umbilical cord. Photos of them as new parents, looking exhausted and happy and in love. I looked at these photos. I tried to connect them to my own identity, tried to understand that the baby in these photos was me, was Charlotte, was the person I was supposed to be before I was stolen. They told me about the day I was taken. Linda had been resting in her hospital room. I had been sleeping in the bassinet next to her bed. A woman in scrubs came in. She said she needed to take me for some routine tests. Linda was tired. She didn't question it. She trusted that the hospital staff knew what they were doing. She fell asleep. She woke up 2 hours later. She started to worry. She called the nurse. They told her no tests had been ordered. The panic set in. They searched everywhere. They couldn't find me. The police were called. The hospital was locked down, but by then I was already gone. They told me about how they learned that a nursing assistant named Susan Hartley had also disappeared that day. Her car was gone from the parking lot. Her apartment was empty, cleaned out. She had clearly planned this. She had been working at the hospital for 6 months. She had seemed normal, competent. No one suspected that she was capable of something like this. They told me about how the FBI got involved, about how there was a massive search, about how they followed up on tips and leads from all over the country, about how there were reported sightings of me in different states, but none of them ever panned out, about how after a few years the case went cold, about how they were told that I was likely dead or living under a different identity, with no way to be found. But they refused to believe that. They kept searching. They kept hoping. Linda told me about how she had severe depression for years after I was taken, about how she could barely function, about how she and Michael almost divorced. The grief and the stress were too much, but they eventually decided to try to have another child, not to replace me, but to continue their family. Jonathan was born 2 years after I was taken. Emma was born 3 years after that. Having more children helped them heal, but they never forgot about me. They never stopped looking for me. They told me about how they had my room ready for me all these years. They kept it the way they had decorated it when I was born. Pink walls, a crib that eventually became a toddler bed, then a regular bed. As the years passed and I didn't come home, they would go in there and sit and cry, talk to me like I was there. They celebrated my birthday every year with a cake and candles, even though I wasn't there to blow them out. They never gave up hope, even when it seemed hopeless. I listened to all of this. I felt so many emotions I couldn't even name them all. I felt grief for the childhood I should have had with them. I felt anger at Susan and Richard for stealing me from them. I felt guilt for having lived a happy life while they were suffering. I felt confused about my identity, who I was supposed to be now. I felt overwhelmed by the fact that I had this whole family who loved me and wanted me, but who I didn't know at all. We talked about practical things too. About the legal case against Richard and Susan. About the fact that they would almost certainly go to prison for a long time. About the fact that my legal name would need to be changed back to Charlotte Elizabeth Bergstrom. About the fact that my birth certificate that said I was Catherine Marie Harrison, born in Oregon, was fraudulent. I would need to get proper documentation showing who I really was. We talked about my wedding, which was supposed to be in 2 months. I said I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should postpone it, cancel it, go ahead with it. Everything in my life was chaos right now. I didn't know how to make decisions about anything. Linda spoke softly. Sweetheart, you need to do whatever feels right to you. If you want to postpone the wedding, then postpone it. If you want to go ahead with it, then we will be there to support you. We will be there as your family, as your real family. I started crying again. The idea of having them at my wedding, of having my real mother there, it was something I had never even imagined. We agreed to stay in touch, to talk on the phone every day, to start building a relationship. They gave me space to process everything. They didn't pressure me to move to Minneapolis or to immediately integrate into their family. They understood that this was overwhelming, traumatic, that I needed time. Over the next few weeks, I talked to them almost every day. I learned so much about them, about who they were as people, about their personalities, their interests, their lives. I also told them about myself, about who I had become growing up as Catherine, about my education, my career, my relationship with James. They listened. They asked questions. They were genuinely interested in me, not just in the baby they had lost, but in the adult I had become. I also had to deal with the legal situation, giving statements, providing information for the case against Richard and Susan. It was incredibly painful. I still loved them, even though I was angry at them. I had to testify about my childhood, about what they had told me about my adoption. I had to sit in court and look at them, see them in orange jumpsuits, looking old and scared. Susan cried when she saw me. She mouthed, "I love you." I had to look away. I couldn't handle it. The DNA test results came back. They officially confirmed that I was Charlotte Elizabeth Bergstrom. the biological daughter of Linda and Michael Bergstrom, the baby who had been kidnapped from the hospital 28 years earlier. With those results, my entire legal identity changed. I had to get new identification, a new birth certificate, a new social security card. Everything had to reflect my real name, my real birthday, my real parents. I had to tell my friends, my extended family on the Harrison side. It was horrible. Most of them didn't believe me at first. They thought I was having some kind of mental breakdown, or that I had been scammed. When they finally understood that it was real, that Richard and Susan had kidnapped me, some of them stopped speaking to me. They felt like I was betraying the Harrisons by going to the police. I lost relationships with people I had known my entire life. I had to tell my employer, my coworkers. I needed time off to deal with everything. My name was in the news now. The story had broken. A 28-year-old kidnapping case had been solved because of a DNA test. Journalists were calling me, trying to interview me. I had to make my social media accounts private. Strangers were messaging me. It was completely overwhelming. James was incredible through all of this. He was patient, supportive, understanding. He never once made me feel like this was too much, or like he wanted to leave. He came with me to every meeting with the Bergstroms, every court hearing. He held my hand through all of it. I knew that I wanted to marry him, that I needed him in my life as my partner through all of this chaos. We decided to go ahead with the wedding as planned. We felt like we needed something positive, something happy to focus on, something that was about our future, not about my traumatic past. The Bergstroms were incredibly supportive. Linda offered to help with the planning. We talked about the fact that she would walk me down the aisle, along with Michael. They were my real parents. They had missed so much of my life already. They deserved to be part of this important moment. The wedding was beautiful. It was on June 10th, at a garden venue in Portland. I wore a white dress that Linda helped me choose. I had my hair done the way she suggested. When it was time to walk down the aisle, both Linda and Michael walked with me, on either side. I looked at James, waiting for me at the altar. I felt so much love, so much hope for the future. Despite everything that had happened, Emma was one of my bridesmaids, even though we had only known each other for a few months. Jonathan walked her down the aisle during the processional. It felt right to have them there, to have my biological siblings be part of my wedding day. When the officiant said, "We are gathered here today to celebrate the marriage of Charlotte and James," I felt this strange sensation. I still wasn't used to being called Charlotte, but I also knew that was who I really was, my real name, my real identity. Richard and Susan were not at the wedding. They were in jail, awaiting trial. I had conflicting feelings about that. Part of me missed them, wanted them there. They had raised me. They had been at every important moment of my life up until now. But another part of me was angry, hurt. They didn't deserve to be there. They had lost the right to be my parents when they stole me from my real parents 28 years ago. In my wedding vows to James, I said that he had been my rock through the most difficult period of my life, that he had loved me when I didn't even know who I was anymore, that he had helped me discover my true identity, my real family, that I was grateful every day that I had him by my side. I promised to love him, support him, the way he had loved and supported me. The wedding reception was joyful. The Bergstroms got to meet James's family, my friends. People kept commenting on how much I looked like Linda, and Michael, and Emma, and Jonathan. It felt surreal to finally look like my family, to finally have people say things like, "You have your mother's eyes," or "You have your father's smile." I had gone my entire life not looking like anyone. Now suddenly I had this whole family that I was a physical part of. Linda gave a speech during the reception. She said that finding me was the greatest blessing of her life, that she had prayed every day for 28 years that I would come home, that she had never given up hope, even when everyone else told her to, that standing here at my wedding, watching me marry a wonderful man, was more than she ever dreamed possible. She thanked me for being brave enough to seek out the truth, for giving them the chance to be part of my life again. There wasn't a dry eye in the entire venue. After the wedding, James and I went on our honeymoon to Hawaii. It was the first time in months that I felt like I could breathe, that I could relax, just be happy, not think about the trauma, the investigation, the trial. We spent 2 weeks on the beach, swimming, eating good food, just being together. It was exactly what I needed. When we came back, the trial for Richard and Susan was starting. I had to testify. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I had to sit on the witness stand, answer questions about my childhood, about my relationship with them. I had to look at them sitting at the defense table, looking devastated. Susan kept crying. Richard kept his head down. I felt this horrible mix of pity and anger. I testified about how they had told me I was adopted, about how they had always been loving parents to me, about how I never suspected anything was wrong, about how they had homeschooled me, kept me somewhat isolated, about how my mom had been uncomfortable when I did the DNA test. The prosecutor asked me questions about my feelings now that I knew the truth. I said I felt betrayed, angry, sad, but I also said that I still loved them in some way. They had raised me. They were the only parents I had known for 28 years. The defense attorneys tried to paint Susan as mentally ill, incapable of understanding what she was doing. They brought in psychiatrists who testified about her history of depression, infertility issues, but the prosecution argued that she had clearly planned the kidnapping, that she had stolen my identity, created false documents, lived a lie for 28 years, that she knew exactly what she was doing, had chosen to do it anyway. Richard testified in his own defense. He admitted that he had learned about the kidnapping several years after they moved to Oregon, but he said he didn't know what to do. He loved me. He couldn't bear the thought of losing me. He said Susan had threatened to kill herself if he turned her in. He said he made the wrong choice, but he did it out of love. I watched him cry on the stand. I felt sorry for him, but I also felt angry. He could have ended this years ago. He could have told the truth, given me back to my real family, but he chose not to. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they came back with their verdict, they found both Richard and Susan guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Susan to 30 years in prison, Richard to 15 years in prison. When the sentences were read, Susan collapsed. She had to be helped out of the courtroom. I sat there feeling numb. I felt like I should be happy that justice was served. But instead, I just felt empty, sad. After the trial, I tried to move forward with my life. I tried to build a relationship with the Bergstroms, with my real family. It was complicated. We had missed so much time together. I didn't have childhood memories with them. We were essentially strangers trying to become family. But we worked at it. We made an effort. We talked on the phone regularly, visited each other, tried to create new memories together. Linda and I developed a close relationship. We talked almost every day. She told me stories about when I was a baby. She showed me photos and videos from those first 6 days of my life. She helped me understand where I came from, who my biological family was. I learned about my grandparents who had passed away, about my aunts and uncles, cousins who I had never met. Slowly, I started to feel like I belonged, like I had a place in this family. Emma and I became close too. She's 3 years younger than me. She's funny, smart, creative. She said she had always felt like something was missing in her life, like there should have been an older sister there. And now here I was. We started doing sister things together, going shopping, getting coffee, talking about relationships, work, life. It felt natural. Right. Jonathan was a little more reserved. I think he had a harder time processing everything. He was older when I was taken. He had grown up hearing about me his whole life. I think it was strange for him to suddenly have this older sister who was a real person, not just a story. But we talked. We spent time together. Slowly, we built a relationship. He told me that he was glad I was found, that he was glad his parents finally had closure. Peace. Michael, my biological father, was quiet, emotional. He cried a lot when we first met. He told me that he had blamed himself for years for not protecting me, for not being there when Susan took me from the hospital. I told him it wasn't his fault. He couldn't have known. He did everything he could to find me. He said that having me back was the greatest gift he could have ever received, that he was sorry we missed so much time together. I told him we would make up for it now. I've been thinking a lot about the signs that I missed, or ignored, like how I never looked like my parents, like how my mom was overly protective, didn't like to travel, like how they homeschooled me, kept me somewhat isolated, like how my mom avoided official paperwork, always seemed nervous about doctor's appointments, school registration, like how we never visited Minnesota, even though that's supposedly where I was from, like how my mom reacted strangely to the DNA test. I realize now that all of these things were clues, signs that something wasn't right, but I didn't see them. I had no reason to question my parents. I trusted them completely. I want to tell other people who might be in similar situations something important. If you're adopted and you've always felt like something didn't quite add up, if you've wondered about your origins and your birth family, if you've thought about taking a DNA test but been afraid of what you might find, I would encourage you to seek out the truth. The truth is always better than living a lie. Your biological family might be out there, searching for you. You deserve to know who you really are, where you really came from. I also want to tell adoptive parents something. Be honest with your children. Tell them the truth about their adoption from the beginning. Provide them with information about their biological families if possible. Understand that children have a right to know their own origins, their own stories. Keeping secrets and telling lies, even if you think you're protecting them, will only cause more pain in the long run. For people who have been through trauma, who have had their identities shaken, who have had their lives turned upside down, I want to say that it's okay to feel conflicted. It's okay to love people who have hurt you. It's okay to grieve the life you thought you had while also being grateful for the truth. It's okay to feel angry and sad and confused all at the same time. It's okay to take time to process, to heal, to figure out who you are now. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've been through something similar, if you've discovered you were adopted later in life, if you've found biological family through DNA testing, if you've had to reconcile different identities or different families, or if you've dealt with the trauma of discovering that your entire life was based on lies, I would love to hear how you dealt with it, where you are now. I'm still processing everything that happened, still building relationships with my biological family, still grieving the loss of the parents who raised me, even though they betrayed me, still trying to understand who Charlotte Elizabeth Bergstrom is versus who Catherine Marie Harrison was. But I'm grateful that I know the truth now. I'm committed to moving forward with honesty, with love, for all the people who are truly part of my life, both my biological family who never stopped searching for me, and my husband James, who has stood by me through all of this chaos, who helped me find myself.